We have a lot to cover in terms of criteria changes and a few things that have been going on. We know that you have a lot of questions, so we're going to get right into it. We also have a PVP webinar later today, so we're going to get going so that we can cover as many questions as possible. Joining me today is Mr. Williams, Roger J. Williams, Interim President. He'll do a brief welcome and summarize some of the concerns that he have received from you and in terms of where we are as an agency and where we're hoping to go. I'm Perlita Walters-Gillum, and then Carly is with us as well as Teron King. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Williams for the brief welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Perlita. Welcome. I would like to give you definitive. The surface of the last 12 months. There's a big event coming up for February 1st, the temporary injunction hearing. Just yesterday that I will be allowed to testify at it. Currently, injunction hearings such as this isn't automatically open for testimony, but rather for the record. We've got a record, preparing a record for about 4 months now. And we will certainly know something. There are a number of theories about as you can know, the temporary injunction hearing itself, but also the politics. I frankly do not want to get into any details on. We're an accrediting agency, not a PR firm. I do hope that many of you out there want to buy both last email as your voice been heard. Someone did query me back and asked what exactly that would do. And I thought to myself, well, if I were running for 11 years, I would certainly be contacting the Chamber of Commerce, to contact the National Chamber of Commerce, probably my congressperson, the state delegate and state senator, and whoever else I could get a hearing with, so that we raise our voice about just how unfair and irrational the current status that we are faced with today presents to you, the institution, thousands, hundreds of thousands by our last count, probably up to 300,000 students that are out there, the communities that you're in, the employees that you have. This is a major event. And what we speak to the issue is not 12 months to demonstrate. We have been on a very aggressive review and revision to demonstrate to the department that we have made. Has it been muted all this time? Is that a yes or no?
It cuts out.
Okay.
It's muffled. Oh, you can hear me.
This is why I hate government. We can hear, but not hear. Okay. And what should I answer to that? Hello? Is this any better? Garble? Speaking? We can hear a conversation. Does that mean yes? Somebody say yes to me, please. I'm glad we're not running the train system today. It says muted.
You could leave
No, it's not muted. Oh, it's yours. And you need to mute the leaders. And
do I have any reason to believe that people have heard anything of what I said? Okay. I'm told that now you can hear me.
I have no idea what
idea
you've heard before. I will try and make this very brief
because I know we have very important things to work on today. The primary point of my welcome, which may be an unconventional welcome, is to give you a relatively short update on where we are relative to our status with the recognition criteria and the department's position, of course, which at this point remains in denial.
And
that is a temporary injunction hearing is coming up on February 1st. Our attorney contacted us yesterday to inform us that the judge has agreed to allow my testimony. I'm not sure who else will be testifying except one name that's come up from the Department of Education. In the normal course, apparently they do not allow testimony in this, so you had to get permission, and we have.
Muted.
I'm hopeful, we're hopeful that the opportunity to actually speak to these issues, not simply on the brief that was forwarded to the court, but also on direct conversation, or not conversation, testimony rather, at the hearing. That aside, there are, of course, other events happening separate and apart from the judicial system that we're working through, and that is in administrations. I'm sure all of you realize that there is a major transition taking place, including hearings that are going on, including that for the nomination for Secretary of Education. And we have heard things from various sources as to some possible opportunity for a thoughtful hearing over there. No details, and frankly, I don't remain overly hopeful on that account because transitions are very big events, and we're not all that big a component of the big events at the current time. But certainly the temporary injunction is a very big one, and we're very hopeful that will come out of that in good stead with the judge. The one point I said earlier, and I don't know if any of you heard it, was that I have been asked what schools can do. Certainly contacting whoever in your community, your employees, your Chamber of Commerce, your congressman, senator, regardless of party affiliation, your state people, to raise the voice on the seriousness of this issue and the consequences that you're facing, including the consequences of that provisional PPG, which is a very, very strong and potentially devastating set of requirements that you're having to deal with right now. So I wish I could offer better news. I think there's certainly reason for hope that remains in the future. Would not be able to frankly come in here every day, and the staff probably would be similarly inclined if we didn't retain that sense of hope, and expect to be able to get back to you shortly after February 1st with an update on this. With that said, unless there is some burning question coming back from the field, I'd like us to get into the real substance of the webinar, and we'll turn this over to Perlita.
Unmuted.
Thank you, Roger. As Roger said, if you have any questions, we have 30 minutes saved at the end of this webinar, about 1:30 thereabout, for questions. Anything we cannot answer, we'll try to follow up through some publication on our website to provide information to all schools at the same time. Now let's get into the criteria. The first topical area would be the final criteria revisions and changes that were approved between August council meeting and the December council meeting. We'll go over those in detail as much as possible. Then we have a few informational items for your information concerning PVP, for example, and then we'll get into some questions and comments before Carly starts the PVP session thereafter. Hopefully you can hear me. Just a note on where you can find the memo. It's already on our website. And then let's get going. I know you received the memo to the today, so I'm hopeful that you were able to review the content. It's very extensive, about quite a bit of information for you to. Hi, I hope you can hear me now. There you go. Yes, I see a couple of yeses. Well, that was 5 minutes I'll never get back of speaking to myself. Sorry about that. Previously, we provided info. I showed a slide on the where you can access the memo to the field. Um, And like I said, it was sent out yesterday, and we appreciate your patience. I got a couple of emails from some of you asking, when can we get the document for us to review before the webinar? And I'm hoping that you have a copy at your disposal so you can review as we go through these final changes, so that the questions are more qualified based on the publication. And I think I made a note in there that says that the question should not be too specific to your institution, but of the overall changes that we've made in the attempt to streamline our processes, to clarify language, and to remain compliant in spite of everything that's going on, as Roger explained earlier. I'm going to do the first couple of these, and then you'll get a break from my voice, and Carly will do a few of them, and then Tehran will finish up at the end. Starting with the CAR procedure and guidelines and Appendix L, consistent with the process that you should be familiar with. Before any criteria changes become final, they have to be proposed. So the first few, the ones that are final criteria changes, all went to the field, all went to you for comment and feedback, and on the implications, on the language, etc. So after receiving that feedback, which was very limited, I must share, the council considered the comments received and did its review and made these changes final. The CAR procedures one became final effective December 6th, and that's different than the others which are effective January 1st, 2017. I'm pointing that out specifically because that was also communicated in the September memo to the field, where it was noted that if these changes are approved by the council, they will be applied to the 2016 CAR. We've gotten multiple, responses from you concerning that application, that retro application, but it wasn't the memo to the field and open to your comments and feedback. Surprisingly, I think 1 out of 600 and something had a comment. That being said, on the screen you'll see a summary of the critical changes for or the components of the criteria changes that we made concerning Appendix L and sections 2-1-809, 2-2-502, and 2-2-503. The most critical areas would be now there's a clear line. Previously, we had 70 as the benchmark, 60 as the compliance point, and then anything below that would be subject to some kind of action. If you look at the memo to the field on page 6 and 7, the council outlined what the margins are. If you're below 60% but within, then an action will be taken, or these are the actions that could be taken based on the submission point. So that's now clearly defined. And of course, again, this was implemented at the December meeting. If you're determined to be out of compliance with the student achievement outcomes, we will take an action. And a few schools got some letters to that effect concerning show cause actions as a result of student achievement outcomes, withdrawal of programs, as a result of their CAR submissions. So the council may direct you to show cause, and that require immediate notification, public notification to the students and the public. continue on the implications of the final changes, like I said, if a program is found to be out of compliance, and if you look at the tables on pages 6 and 7, you will see that an adverse action can be taken. The council can ask the school or withdraw the approval of a program because of poor performance. And we've seen this last course submission, we saw 31% and 43% and 15% in placement and retention. And the council took into account enrollment numbers and graduation numbers that were less than 10. So it's not the excuse that, well, it was only 2 students that graduated from the program, so that's why it's 50%. Wouldn't work. So these are all based on information that's higher than 10 enrollment or graduates. Okay. The last point on this criteria revision, and I'm expecting that we'll get a few comments to that effect. Roger just shared that these changes were very critical in our recognition of the Department of Education. If you were following the drama that was the ACICS recognition process, that was one of the key points that or criticisms, if you want to call it that, on our continued recognition and taking action on poor performance. And schools we've gotten the feedback that's, well, this is the first time we're doing that, or we didn't have to do that before, or it's only the first year. The council's concern in December was, well, it's the first year, but you're at a 33% placement rate. What does that do for the students in the programs, with the expectation that the program will help them better themselves in terms of career outcomes? So that was the discussion during the December meeting when these changes were made final and implemented at that time. The next area is the council action standards, and that's on page 9 thereabout of the memo to the field. And these changes went into effect at the beginning of this year in terms of some of you may be familiar with the admonishment language. We admonish you if we're missing one or a minor document during your response for an application, renewal application, or other application. The council removed that as a formal action. And if we're just missing one transcript or one ledger card, that would be a request for information, which would then satisfy the concern. So it wouldn't be a formal council action. The first one item is very important concerning the addition of the introduction to that section. There has been the understanding by many in the field that given the way the standards were outlined on the 2-3-200, 210, 220, 230, that these were in order, that the council had to defer, then issue a compliance warning, then do a show cause directive in that order because of the way it's outlined in the criteria. However, that is not accurate in the expectations of the council. To make sure that's clearly understood, the council added an introduction to 2-3-200, which says that they can take any of the following actions at any time, including the final adverse action. So the council does not have to issue a compliance warning before it issues a show cause or withdrawal by suspension or withdrawal by a revocation action. It can take any of these actions as necessary at any point in time. So that should clarify, hopefully, the misunderstanding of the criteria as it's written. This went back and forth for a bit. I think the September memo for item number 3, the September memo outlined it in the reverse, saying that we're going to combine show cause and probation would absorb show cause, and now everything would be probation. For the deliberation in December, feedback from the field and all the stakeholders, and the reverse has been implemented. That is, show cause and probation have still been combined into show cause directive. So everything will be show cause directive. There will be no longer probation standards, just show cause. And we've gone through the criteria, and hopefully have caught all references to probation order and replaced it with show cause directive and vacating the show cause. And that enhanced show cause directive council action will now require notice to the department, to students, and to the public. And then finally, it had gotten to a point where we were having more hearings than a council meeting to talk about actions, institutional actions. I think last time we had 2 or 3 days of just hearings, and that was becoming cumbersome. And the council then made the decision that all hearings will be in writing, where a panel will meet and review the documentation provided by the institution, and then make a recommendation to the full council. An in-person hearing has to be specifically directed. So if a school is placed on show cause, for example, the council in its letter will say the institution is directed to show cause in person. That will be specifically addressed in the letter. Otherwise, all hearings will be in writing. Requirement for the Title IV compliance audit. The council considered the fact, and this was proposed last time, the fact that observations or concerns are raised and identified in the compliance audit from the Department of Education that ACICS did not have access to. Either the department didn't share it, or the school didn't share it, or we didn't see it when on site, or for whatever reason. To minimize or to remove that concern where we may not be aware of something going on that we should consider for the financial review, institutions are now required to submit the compliance audit along with the AFR. And once we receive that, they will be reviewed by the financial analyst, and action might be taken as needed. So the financial review committee might take an action, or additional reviews or assessments might be done by the at-risk institutions group to determine if there's issue with the financial stability or any other concern identified in the compliance audit. The mission statement. This has been finalized, and it's for those of you who've been around for a while, might be wondering what really happened with the change in the mission statement. So previously, the language said a mission statement must include the mission and the career objectives. It has been revised to say the mission must include the mission statement and the objectives, which should be substantially devoted to career-related education. So the mission itself is the full description, and it has to include a statement, the mission statement, and the objectives. Some schools have them outlined in bullets, some have them in one big paragraph, but it has to include objectives that are substantially devoted to career-related education. So that's that change. And I believe that's my last one, CEP. This has been going on for about a year and a half, 2 years, thereabout. No one's keeping count. We approved some changes last year concerning the addition of the level of student satisfaction as a required element. Then in last August, there was a proposal to also add graduation rate and cohort default rates. We received feedback from the field. I actually did a workshop in Indiana, and that was about 30-something participants. And that was a concern that they raised. What is the value of adding cohort default rates? And the council considered that. So just so you know, the council does consider your comments and your feedback, and they agreed. So the final change is the addition of graduation rate as a required element, not cohort default rates, just graduation rate. And that went into effect. So CEPs for 2017 should include graduation rates. The progress reports, and we'll look at Appendix K, and I am on page 14 and 15 of the memo to the field, give or take. Appendix K has it all outlined, the requirement that progress reports have to be completed biannually. We've discussed this before, but previously it just says you have to do progress reports with no qualification as to the expectation. And some of us have a minimalistic perspective and say, well, you didn't say how many, so we'll just do one. And these progress reports are in addition to the annual evaluation that's required. So you have an annual evaluation of the CEP, and you also need to have at least 2 progress reports throughout the year. And this is almost unfortunate that we have to mandate that, the expectation is that as you review your accomplishment of goals identified in the plan for student achievement, specifically licensure, placement, retention, that you would do some reporting throughout the year to see if you're on track to meet your goals. Nonetheless, it's in the criteria now that you need to have at least 2 progress reports. And I'm going to answer the question now before it gets asked. We do not have a template as to what needs to be in the progress reports. The council felt that was too prescriptive, and the expectation is that as an academic or educational institution that you're able to craft a progress report that would capture all the goals that you have identified for the year for all the elements and how you're going to meet them. Non-traditional modes of delivery, that's online, and that has always been an expectation but has been clarified that you have to integrate your distance ed into your CEP, and that's in Appendix H. And not just say, hey, we have online and students take some classes online if they want to, and not just the plan as to who's over it. This is speaking to the actual student information, the performance of the students online versus on ground, the level of student satisfaction online and on ground, faculty satisfaction. That analysis is required for your CEP if you offer distance ed. The level of graduate satisfaction, again, this has to be within 6 months following graduation. The key point for this area is that it has to be of both placed and non-placed graduates. So you have to evaluate the satisfaction of those graduates who didn't get a job. This is also an opportunity for you to get feedback from those graduates as to what concerns they have or what roadblocks they run into so they cannot get a job. Is it something you didn't do on the academic side, career services side, or is it because of their life circumstances that they are not able to commit to a new job, etc.? So that was an opportunity for the institution to get some feedback from the non-placed graduates. And just a reiteration, many schools have already been doing this, but now it's clearly identified in the criteria that you have to, if you offer a program that has licensure rates requirement, you have to evaluate that licensure pass rate as a student learning outcome. It's required. And I think that's all for me, at least for now. I'm going to hand it over to Carly.
Muted. Okay, so again, that first change is to the learning site definition. This one is pretty significant in that the council acted to go ahead and put a hard distance requirement around to include a 5-mile radius with a managing campus. So they again put specific parameters around what that distance would be. However, allowing for consideration of other learning sites on a case-by-case basis. So again, they just have to seek approval on that case-by-case basis if outside a 5-mile radius of the managing campus, branch or main. Now for new learning sites, this is effective January 1st of this year. So any new applications would be considered under this. However, for those that are already in operation, we've already done an analysis to find those that are outside a 5-mile radius, and we will be sending out an assessment survey with a few questions to provide schools to give us their rationale for these locations. And again, this was put in to prevent skewing of reporting data due to a large, vast distance between the two, and also to prevent a deficiency of services provided to students due to a learning site being an extreme distance. Okay, and the next one is the workshop attendance time frame. And this is basically a clarification language. What they did is they kind of identified the timeline to be within 18 months of submission of the evaluation visit materials. Previously, it was within 18 months of the submission of the self-study, but they did this to make it a little closer to the actual visit date, so that way, by the time it comes for the visit, that information isn't old and almost not irrelevant, but just old and unfamiliar. Okay, the next one. This is another glossary definition, specifically the externship definition. And really this was just a tweak to the language to the way it was written previously. It was a little confusing and unclear. It seemed that the agreement had to be written under the supervision of a qualified individual. However, they clarified the language to show that the actual externship course needs to be run by a qualified faculty member. Okay. Okay, next one. These were a few changes to admissions, transfer credit, and it also affected catalog. And this is in regards to mainly foreign students. Just stating that, and while this is a practice that, again, has been in place by many of our institutions, it's become a criteria that for foreign students to be accepted, they have to show that the transcripts have been evaluated for equivalency, okay, by one of the necessary organizations, and that they must have received, or that transfer credits being considered must be from an accredited institution or one that's recognized by the respective government in that country. Okay, and also they added some language to state that this must be, the transfer policies must be stated specifically in the catalog. Okay. All right, and the next one I'm going to turn it over to Tehran.
Thanks, Carly. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to cover the next few slides, which stemmed from our systematic review of the accreditation criteria and were included in the last memorandum to the field as proposed and are now have now been made final. So the first is dealing with basic records, specifically section 3-1-303. Excuse me. Changes to this section of the criteria were made to clarify and update language regarding appropriate record keeping. Keeping in mind that glossary definitions were also added to define the specific different type of records. The key components are the clarification of the definition of student records, which must include at a minimum student admissions and advisement, permanent, academic, and financial records. And as I just stated, these are now included in the definition section of, well, in the glossary section of the criteria. There's also the addition of electronic records management systems and software as acceptable methods of protecting these student records, and the addition of the requirement for the publication and adoption of the policy for properly maintaining records, which should address, again, those three types of student records: academic records, admissions and advisement records, and financial aid records. The next section deals with the library and library instructional resources and technology, as well as Appendix H of the criteria. Changes to these sections of the criteria were made to ensure that resources lead to academic success. The key components that are covered in the revisions are that each institution must provide up-to-date means to access resources and provide continuous assessment strategies, which should include faculty and staff. Resources for online students must include access to a virtual library collection as well as virtual library services. And all residential campuses must provide a physical space to allow for students to access any library resources. Next is faculty field preparation, section 3-2-102. Revisions to this section of the criteria focus on the number of preparations taught by faculty at the non-degree level, and the revision focused on removing the statement of academic term for the restriction on number of preps. So now it will read at any given time, and that is to address just academic term was a little too vague. And now I'll turn it back over to Perlita or Carly.
Unmuted.
Hi everyone, I'm back. This is for information only component of the webinar. We're trying to go through the questions and sort through how to provide the best guidance. So ACICS bylaws, 3 critical areas for your information actually. So the bylaws, the council revised its expectations on what a public representative is in its bylaws. I think previously it was a little stringent, and it disqualified many very qualified individuals to serve in that role, and which could be beneficial to ACICS. So the changes summarized on your screen: they cannot be employed within the last 3 years or a member of any trade association. So that was just to clean up that language and that requirement for public representatives. And for your information, the council also appointed 2 additional public representatives who began their service January 1, Dr. Judy Tim and Ms. Elizabeth Guinan. So there are 2 additional public representatives. The council also put a stamp, it's on the memo to the field page, page 28 of the memo, on doctoral programs. This was a concern. I had the opportunity to I don't want to call it testify, but appear with Mr. Williams and Dr. Leek at, a CHIA follow-up earlier this year for recognition by CHIA, and that was one of their concerns. And the council spoke about that in December, that the department doesn't recognize ACICS for doctoral. CHIA doesn't, so what is the value added? And so the council had a very thoughtful discussion on that and how we want to move ahead, given our immediate concerns in other areas, to demonstrate to the department that we're compliant. So that's why there has been an immediate hold on accepting any institutions that offer doctoral degrees, or even considering new program applications for doctoral degrees. And the ultimate goal is to phase them out. And we know doctoral programs can go on for a few years, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So Mr. Williams will be having a very candid discussion with those institutions that offer doctoral degrees onto where the students, how soon are they expected to complete, and how we can work with those institutions on an orderly phase out of the programs. And the ACICS placement verification enhancements, like as I mentioned earlier, Carly will be doing a webinar after we're done at about 2 o'clock with AWARE on the PVP changes that we've made that will be launched by the end of the day. We hold off on making any changes until this webinar, and until ACICS was able to provide some information and guidance to you on where we are and how everything is. What does anything mean? Why are we doing all this if you no longer recognize? That's a question I've gotten quite a bit. And I hope Mr. Williams addressed some of those questions. But the updates include the emails that the schools, the graduates, and the employers will receive once you upload the information, and that has been changed significantly. And Carly will show you what that looks like. And then there's an appeals process being established. We've gotten a few personal emails from people saying, well, you said it was invalid, why? And I have all this information, etc. So we established a process for you to contest or petition the decision that we made. And the we is a group. It's not just Perlita deciding that she does not like that placement. So then Carl will speak more about that. And then, like I said, there'll be a session right after this to go into more detail. And something else that's not on this presentation is that We're looking to schedule at least one renewal accreditation workshop this year because we are still doing visits. Mr. Williams sent out some communication, I believe, last week or week before concerning ACICS's continued functioning as an accrediting agency. Not recognized by the department, recognized by TIA, but we're still an accrediting agency and we're following through on our obligation as an accrediting agency. So once I think it makes more sense to wait until February 1 and then we'll figure out when that workshop will be scheduled. We're looking at early March. Some of you have a workshop requirement for a new branch or change of ownership, etc. So we'll that'll be communicated on our website once the date has been confirmed. All right, give you a couple minutes to type in any questions you have, and we're going to start going through the ones that we've received. I do have a general response to those questions from students, and I do appreciate students actually logging in or registering for this webinar. Generally, we don't get student participation. Interesting, which is great. Concerning OPT, and these are the international students who attend institutions here in the U.S., ACICS is unable to give you guidance on OPT. OPT is managed by CVP, so you should speak to your SDO at the institution you attended or you are attending, and then also follow up with CEVP directly to get some information on how to proceed. ACICS has no control as to what happens with OPT once you graduate, if it's going to be approved by CIVIS or not. So I strongly advise you to reach out to CIVIS and find out and explain to them your situation, find out what you should do. But ACICS cannot provide any information or any guidance on that because that's outside of our, that's not governed by ACICS. All right, I am going to pull the questions over and, one question I picked up while was concerning graduation rate. Someone mentioned that previously we had shared that the rate will be provided by ACICS, so you would not have to calculate it. Checking with IT and with Tehran on that information, we were able to, using the schedule to cohort information that you provided at the last car, we have graduation rate information. The concern is how accurate is it if institutions didn't understand what schedule to graduate was. So we'll go through that data to see how accurate it is. In the meantime, I believe we're still capturing that information. That's what the schedule to graduate cohort column is all about, so we can know when the students are supposed to graduate versus when they actually graduate. And there has been some confusion about what that means and what information, what date needs to be there, is it on the enrollment agreement, etc. But that's how we're going to, and then someone had a question about, is it at 150%, 100%, etc. in terms of the calculation of the formula that we're using. Because we're just collecting the data. I believe we just got it this first time in the 2016 CAR. I'm sure there'll be modifications or revisions needed. And then once I find out from the leadership team as to what direction or what guidance that we need to provide, we'll follow up with you concerning that. And in the meantime, because it's required in the CEP, I recommend that you use the information that you have to report to the department. It's not going to be pretty, but you should report that. And we have not yet established a baseline or a minimum rate that you have to have yet. And that will come with time once we evaluate what the what's appropriate. I guess it's probably a better way to look at it. It may not be 60%, but whatever is based on the data that we've collected, now that we are collecting the schedule to graduate cohort and can do the calculation on our end, figure out how do we go about establishing a compliance point for graduation rate. All right. So give me a minute while I go through. Someone asked if you can get the slides emailed afterwards. It's placed on the website, correct? Yes, it'll be on the website afterwards. All right, give me a minute. Someone's asking, hi, will ACICS get accredited again? I'm not sure if you heard what Mr. Williams said. We have schedule hearing on February 1, and thereafter we'll see what happens after that. So then I think that's the confusion. I also gotten questions from students. Schools, you've tried your best to inform the students voluntarily or involuntarily. Uh, but students then asking, well, is ACICS not accredited? My school said that ACICS, oh, it lost its accreditation. So they're confusing the school's accrediting status and ACICS's recognition status. So two different things. So ACICS is still an accrediting agency. We're just not recognized by the Department of Ed for purposes of financial aid. That's the change. And if you can communicate that to your students in that way, because students think that the schools are no longer accredited. You're still accredited, just not accredited by an agency recognized by the Department of Education. Someone's asking about the PVP webinar. That will be in about 30 minutes. Oh my, sorry about that. A few questions, few comments, so I have to go through all and to sort through. Yeah, some are OPT questions that, like I said, please, okay, here's a question. Whoosh. Can progress reports fit into the headings of a school CEP? The CEP is the plan where you outline the plan for the year. The progress report should be in, you can append it to it as you do the progress reports, but it shouldn't be embedded in the CEP, because the point is that you're doing these reports once you establish your CEP throughout the year, so you can see how you're doing in implementing your CEP. I spoke about the graduation rate already. I'm not sure that that was clear. If it was not clear about the graduation rate, feel free to send me a note, and then so I can craft a response that can be applied to all institutions and everyone's on the same page. Oh, Carly will take this one about learning sites. For learning sites already approved by council, if the survey results lend the staff or council to deem the site is no longer a learning site by the new definition, what is the expectation? Will these sites become branches, and will the department consider the major change which requires their oversight and approval under the provisional PPA? That was a long one.
Muted.
Yes. Programs with less than 10 students did not count toward student achievement review. I couldn't see that. Is that the same type of question? How do you determine inactive for at least 2 years? What is the start date of that time of measurement?
Unmuted.
And that was one of the changes from to that person's question. It is in page 4 of the memo on the termination of programs. We same with the 3-year period. Because 3 years now we changed to 2 years, and I forgot to specifically identify this change. We use the CAR period, reporting period. So it wouldn't be a calendar year because we don't collect data on that schedule. So if a program is inactive for 2 CAR reporting periods, which probably would not be a bad idea to specify that right here, for at least 2 years, then they'll be considered discontinued. So that's what that means. Someone's asking, can we know the results following the February 1 the same day? Mr. Williams have tried really hard to provide information as we receive it. So once we have the hearing, I'm not sure what time it is. I know he's testifying, but I'm not sure what time we're scheduled for. If we have information that same day, he usually has something prepared for immediate release. So we will communicate that via our website as soon as we get that information. When will the doctorate level phase out discussion take place? That's been scheduled. I know Mr. Williams also sent a follow-up email to those schools that offer doctoral programs because he did not receive some responses from some schools, and some of the dates didn't work. So I think once everyone, the idea is to be make this a cooperative and collaborative effort. It's not we're shutting this down and you don't have a choice. It's more we would like to phase this out, and we invite your participation in the process. He's having some resistance from some schools just to schedule the teleconference. So once he has a date, hopefully in the next few weeks, I know he's focused on preparing for the hearing on February 1st. I'm sure he'll communicate that with everyone. Any major, PVP stuff. We'll be talking about the PVP in a little while. What is the contact information for PVP? Again, we're talking about the PVP in a little bit. How do we state our accreditation with ACICS in the catalog? Good question. And then we actually spoke about that some time ago and we'll be talking about it at the policy meeting. If you look at Appendix C, I'm hoping you have a catalog close to you, but you probably don't. On page 113, we modify the statement where you announce your accreditation. It says the ACICS is recognized as a national accrediting agency by the Council for Higher Education Accreditation. So it only makes note of our tier recognition because we're no longer recognized by the department. I'm not sure, and someone can please educate me, if the department requires that you have something in addition to that, or if the states require that you have something in addition to saying your accrediting status. If you have to say that your accrediting agency lost its recognition, etc. I am not aware of that. It's interesting, this question. Someone's asking how positive are we to get the judgment in favor of ACICS? That's like flipping a coin. And it's, it's difficult, it's unreasonable, unrealistic to try to do a prediction, anything at this point. And I think for the most part, and I think Roger hinted on it, that staff, myself included, have been working diligently to implement changes to demonstrate our compliance, to demonstrate our ability to be in compliance within the 12 months had we received those 12 months. And if we didn't think that this was going to be in any way worth it in the end, I'm not sure if either any one of us would be here. So we're doing our best to be diligent in our review, and that's the other part of that too. Many schools are asking, well, why do I have to have this visit? Well, you're still accredited, and part of the accreditation process is for a review. And that's why we keep doing what we're doing. If ACICS is granted a preliminary injunction, what is the chain of events that will take place? Will ACICS's recognition be reinstated until results of the full legal proceedings? What will happen to the 18-month PPA? Is that process on hold? We don't have any of those. Are good questions. We just don't have the answers, unfortunately. And that's what Mr. Williams was saying. He knows we have the injunction coming up. We're able to get him to testify, but that's it. We don't know what the implications will be. And to that question, what I was asked earlier, once we find out, once we can get a sense of, well, okay, we got it. What does that mean? What does that mean for the department? Will that stop what they are doing? Will it reverse what they've already done since December, whatever it was? What does that mean really for those institutions that are stuck between that rock and hard place? Okay, yeah. Carly's saying, tell them PVP will be immediately following. So all these PVP questions, we're going to hold off on them until then. Is there an official statement of the catalog status for the catalog on website? That's what I just referenced on page 113. Some schools don't say anything about ACICS, by the way. But if you're going to make a public announcement, the statement is on page 113 of the criteria. Someone is asking a political question that I have no response to. We have no way of knowing what the new administration will and will not do in terms of where we are. And that's why Roger mentioned you doing what you have to do at the grassroots, ground level, in your state, in your community, to make the case for why ACICS is needed. Many schools have asked, well, what is ACICS doing in terms of PR? And that's not our role. That's you on the ground interacting with the employers, graduates, community, Chamber of Commerce, and other people in the other stakeholders who appreciate the value of what your institution is doing in that community. Is there a place that we can get information regarding graduation rates? It's confusing, and okay, that's noted. Like I said, I'll be speaking with Dr. King and the IT VP of IT to go through what we're capturing. He did share that there was a misunderstanding on what the schedule to graduate cohort, what that number needed to be. Schools didn't understand that, so that may skew the data that we have collected. But it is required, so it's important that we provide you with the guidance that you need to report it accurately. Someone is asking, why do we change the time from an approved for 2 years rather than 3 years? Because 3 years is a long time to have a program sitting with no enrollments, no activity. And at that point in time, it might be necessary to do some revisions to that program. And what is the point of having the program inactive for 3 years? To try to enroll students in a program that has no currency, no activity for the last 3 years. Carly was supposed to be speaking on learning sites. I don't think you heard her.
Muted.
Okay, hopefully I'm coming through now. Regarding the learning sites, we had the question that if a learning site is out of the 5-mile radius, submitted to be reconsidered on the case-by-case basis, but is deemed inappropriate, one option would be to reclassify as a branch campus, but how would this work under the provisional PPA that's currently in place? Well, that's a little ways down the road, but in looking at the language, we have made some consideration, obviously, and the language does say that under limited, I believe it's limited circumstances or, you know, under, you know, just obviously the minority of those considered would be approved under the PPA by the DOE. And ACICS is aware of that, and consideration may be made to an extension on the time frame, so extending that January 1st, 2018 for those already in operation is certainly a consideration that may be made. However, those decisions have not been made yet until obviously we see how things proceed here over the next few months. Okay. Okay, and again, we're getting questions. When is the PVP webinar? And that'll be directly following this. So you'll just stay on the webinar. There's not a separate webinar. Okay. Okay. We have a question. So you mentioned you're not approving doctoral programs. Are you approving programs in any capacity? Yes, as Perlita mentioned, we are still operating as a full-fledged accrediting agency. So we are still doing, all the program approvals. Obviously, doctoral is a phase out for our agency, so that's why we are not doing those approvals.
Unmuted.
All right. I hope you can hear me. There's a question about a school closing at the end of this year. What does that mean, and do they have to do the CAR and the PVP? Yes, because the CAR is due in November, and you're closing in December. So you've been in existence or you've been in operation for that CAR period. In terms of what actions would be taken necessarily, that might be something different. We had situations this past council where there were schools that were going to close at the end of the year, end of this December. The council met in December, earlier in December, and those campuses had rates that would materially be out of compliance, but the council noted and took into consideration that they were closing, so an adverse action wasn't taken. But you would have to report your student data on the 2017 CAR. Same for PVP. That's 11 months away. Should still submit your monthly PVPs. All right, we're still going through the questions. Quite a few questions on OPT and thereabouts. Let me see. Oh. Someone's asking about the benchmark for graduation rate. I mentioned at the beginning that we just got a first set of data on graduation rate that we collected from the 2016 CAR. So with that limited data, we cannot yet set a benchmark. That's not appropriate and not very sound. So once we have additional information, then the council will review and open it up for your feedback, like we've done consistently, to get some feedback on what the benchmark should be for graduation rate. Can you restate your answer regarding the improvement plans being required for 60 to 69? I'm not sure I understand the question. If you look at the table for Appendix L, what is... I'm sorry, I'm going to the document so I'm not speaking incorrectly based on for less than 10, for 60 to 69, for which submission though? So the table, if you look at the table on pages 6 and 7, there's a current submission following year 1 and following year 2. And the submission period may affect the action taken. But at any point in time, as I said at the beginning, the council can take an immediate adverse action if it deems that necessary. So it depends on where you are on the submission point. But at the program level, these actions would not be taken for program with enrollments less than 10. Graduation rate? Oh, I think I just responded on. What's the ACICS standard benchmark for graduation rate? Not yet established. We just want you to report and get into the habit of collecting the data. You should be collecting that data anyway. I mean, I know the rationale has been previously, well, it's not a true measure of the performance at our campus. Okay, we're setting the CEP. Until then, until we are able to develop a benchmark and a minimum compliance point for graduation rate. We do not yet have that information or set up. Someone's asking if you can get a copy of the webinar and PowerPoint. It will be posted on our website. I'm not going to say immediately because you probably need to scrub out some stuff, make sure it's accurate. So it will be posted on our website probably within a week. DC is very active this week, so our ability to probably get it done this week might be limited. All right. Still going through. Sorry. There's a question, is there a requirement that an institution must keep students and the public informed about the ACICS recognition, loss of recognition situation on advertisements, flyers? I mean, it's just truth in advertising. You want to be in a spirit of full disclosure. I think that's the right thing to do, is to let everyone know, let students know especially what they're walking into or what their situation is, so they can take an action or do what's best for them. I actually got an email from a school earlier was saying that they're losing students with the ACICS loss of recognition, and I empathize with that. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about that. At the end of the day, and students have called asking questions, what are we supposed to do? Should we transfer out? It's so uncertain, like you can't advise them not to do what they think is best for themselves, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next month or so. But you should be transparent.
Muted.
I just wanted to add on top of that, I believe there's the requirement that if an agency has not started the application process or if an institution has not started the application process with another organization within 90 days, they need to make that known as well and publish that.
Unmuted.
There's a question, due to the loss of recognition and loss of students as a result, will there be a leniency on retention rates? That's an interesting question. Honestly, we hadn't thought about it. I'm not sure about the leniency that may be considered part of a mitigating circumstance, or if an action is taken, give you the opportunity to explain why your retention rate went from 85% to 40%. But I don't know about leniency necessarily. But that's something to consider, and I would admit. Someone is asking, it was not clear before, are the colleges closing this December? No. A particular campus mentioned that they were closing, but campuses are not closing. Carly mentioned the need for institutions to seek another accrediting agency. So schools are applying for other agencies so they can continue to award financial aid. But schools aren't closing because we lost recognition. As I explained, we're no longer recognized by the Department of Education for purposes of financial aid. We are still recognized by CHIA, and we're still a full functioning accrediting agency. Would the car placement requirements still be the same? I'm not sure why it would be any different. Oh, I think that's the last one we have. Last question, we don't have any someone said we don't have any graduation rate. The school should be collecting that information. or reporting the information to the department as it is. But you should include it in your CEP and explain why the rates are low, bad, inaccurate, etc. in your CEP until ACICS is able to provide the guidance on, because that was also a concern too. If for those of you who have been following this, that ACICS doesn't capture completion or graduation rate. We have retention, we don't have graduation rate. And the reason has always been, well, students are different. They have nighttime, daytime, part-time, full-time, partial full-time, and partial part-time. And the formula we tried to develop was cumbersome and confusing and didn't say much of anything. We're hoping that with this simplified schedule to graduate cohort, we can get to a graduation rate for 2017. Will this webinar go up on ACICS as we shared? And I think it's right here somewhere. That's the answer to the question about will it be available. It will be on our website, not immediately, like I said. So give us a week or so to put this on our website. And I believe that was the last one. I will say though, we do need your feedback about the webinar, about what the guidance you provided, but also as we consider, because we are continuing to consider revision, changes, enhancements to the current criteria. It's a big book, so there are a lot of things, there are probably a few things that could be revised, modified to fit, to be more accurate, to fit the current situation, the current environment. But we will be having our policy meeting in February. I know the council chair is on the webinar listening. So the council at that time will be considering proposals for criteria changes, revisions, procedural changes as well. So if you have any suggestions or topics or areas that you think the council need to take on the serious advisement, please email Carly and share those with her as she will be managing that process and presenting them to the council in February for their consideration. And I
Muted.
we actually have 5 more minutes. We're going to transition to the PVP webinar. So we're going to put you on hold for a minute so that we can switch gears and discuss the PVP. Thank you everyone for your attention. Really appreciate you joining us today. It's a lot of information, a lot of things being finalized for implementation. And as I've always said, ignorance is not bliss in accreditation, so it's important that you're familiar with those changes. Email us if you have any questions. And as we go through this difficult time, we appreciate your continued support, recognizing that you have to do what's best for your institution, but we appreciate your continued compliance and cooperation through this quality assurance and review processes.
Muted. Unmuted.
All right, good afternoon again, everyone. We're going to go ahead and go on with the PVP update here. This shouldn't be quite as long. We'll go for about 20 minutes or so and then leave time for questions following. What we want to do is just kind of give you some updates, some of the updates we've made, enhancements to the program. We've also implemented a process for appeal for placements that have been marked as invalid by ACICS, and just to also review some of the responsibilities of the institution, specifically when it comes to the PVP submissions. Okay, and first off, one update that is being implemented is an update to those automatic emails that are being sent out to employers and graduates, obviously to verify the employment. Specifically, it's for the emails categorized as benefit. So if you've submitted a placement under the category of benefit, the email has been adjusted so that now the graduate and employer can define what the benefit is from their degree. So the emails look similar to this. Okay, this is the template really that's being used. And for the benefit, they can choose either merit increase, promotion, additional job assignments, or that the credential is needed to maintain the current position. So again, those options are being sent out in the emails to both the graduate as well as the employer. Okay, and then the spreadsheet. As many of you may have noticed already, the drop-down has been fixed, if you will, so that you can choose the month of the submission. We had some issues previously where it was defaulting to the wrong month, so now you can go back and you can choose the month that you are submitting for. And then also the actual spreadsheet has been updated to include the column to designate the actual graduation date. Okay, and just some reminders with the spreadsheet. You want to make sure that your placement date is aligned with the actual placement period. So if you had a placement date of September 27th, 2016, your placement period for which you have that should obviously be September. Secondly, confirm that your SIP and SOC codes align. We've had some that are not aligned, so the SIP code does not match with the SOC code, which obviously causes a problem when you're doing a title match. And then if you want to make sure you include the credential with the program name. When reviewing the PVP, we can't do a side-by-side comparison of the programs at the institution along with what submitted. So if we don't have the credential or if the program name is abbreviated, we have to go back and pull all that information up, which is quite time-consuming. So you want to make sure that you don't abbreviate program names, and please include the credential. Don't abbreviate employer locations, names, and certainly not the job titles, especially when that's the main information that we're looking at to verify that employment. Okay, and next we're going to look at kind of how the PVP affects the visit process, specifically for this winter cycle that is already underway. Previously, evaluation visits we used the specific, it was a 6-month period. We no longer have that anymore. If you may have noticed that already, but now they're just using the monthly submission since we've had that underway for a while now. And specifically, they'll be looking at the July to November for this winter cycle. So those that have not been verified through the PVP, The team, the on-site evaluation team, will be verifying those via phone call, trying to confirm those placements. Now, as far as the 2016 car, the team will still be using that to confirm waivers, and we'll be looking at backup documentation of waivers from that car. Okay, so for visits this cycle, the team will be using your PVP submissions, which should be up to date. We'll be using those to verify placements. Okay. Now, this is a process that's been put in place for any placements that have been deemed invalid by ACICS. So if the placement was not confirmed, or if it was deemed to not be an appropriate placement, we now have a email that has been set up, a review committee that will review if the institution or if the campus, excuse me, has documentation to state otherwise. So placement, if it's been marked invalid, and this could happen for a few different reasons. One, if it was not validated by the employer and graduate, okay, if one verifies, then that should be acceptable if it's an appropriate placement. Another reason it would be marked unverified is if it's a skill placement and students are not utilizing a predominant amount of skills that they received from their program. So some examples would be a phlebotomist, a graduate working as a phlebotomist who graduated from a medical assistant program. That would not be considered an appropriate placement because for the most part in programs, phlebotomy is one or two courses and would not be a predominant part of the medical assistant program. So that would not be an appropriate use of skills in their placement. You know, a phlebotomist program obviously can be a much shorter, less expensive program. And the same goes a nurse graduate placed as a CNA. Again, that would be a similar circumstance and would be marked as invalid or unverified, if you will. And then the other piece, if it's not sustainable, if it's a temporary placement, we've had some that the graduate noted that they were just filling in for somebody, or the placement only lasted a few days. Now that's with the understanding we know that, you know, there are some issues with placements, things don't work out, but the expectation is that there is follow-up. The student or the graduate is assisted in finding an additional or a new placement. Okay. Now, if a placement is marked as unverified or invalid, and those are two in the same, by the way, that can be submitted to pvpreview@acics.org, and that is if the institution has verifiable evidence that the placement is in accordance with the CAR placement guidelines. They can submit this, and information, obviously, don't just submit the information, we also need the placement information to this pvpreview@acics.org, and this will be reviewed by the committee, and then a final decision will be made on that placement. Okay. Now these are just a few reminders of your responsibility when it comes to the PVP. We have warning letters that are ready to send out here shortly, in that the PVP submission is a mandatory reporting requirement and should be completed every month. Even if an institution doesn't have placements for that month, they need to log in, click the box next to no placements, and submit it. Okay, so we should have a listing for each campus every month. Also, it is the institution's responsibility if they find that there are errors In one of the placements, they got the employer email incorrect or the graduate email, you know, a name issue, anything like that, they can resubmit with the corrections. Now, I will caution if there's an error when it comes to the name of the graduate, you'll need to contact us. You can email me directly or Ms. Barker. Email us and we can make that change for you, because obviously if there's a difference in the student name, that would view it as a different student and wouldn't do the override to correct the errors. And then also if a campus has graduates that they're tracking that are not verified in the PVP, they're not verified by the graduate or the employer, and we usually say, about 6 weeks, then it's the responsibility of the campus administration to follow up with that graduate to see that they can get the verification. And then lastly, a reminder that all placements that will be reported on your 2017 Campus Accountability Report, they must be verified through the PVP. So any that cannot be verified through the PVP or marked as unverified cannot be included on the 2017 CAR. Okay, and at this point, we will take questions regarding the PVP.
Okay, Carly and I will go. I think you can hear me. Carly and I will probably go back and forth with the questions. She has the presentation, I have the screen. It's an interesting little juggling job we got going over here. The first one we had was, we have a few employers who said they didn't receive the email, and we checked with IT to make sure it was on our end. He said it could be their browser setting or their email setting. The employers not getting the emails to verify. Just, it could be spam or the setting. I mentioned this last time, and someone was like, well, ooh, we can't share personal email addresses with some employers, and that was not what I was suggesting. I've gotten a school who said, the employers that did not get the email you sent to their work email, this is the email they gave me to share with you. So that's what my intent was. But if the employer is not getting the email, you have to get another email address, and we can update that email address, or you can go in and update that email address as well. So that's why it's important. There's some schools who do a really good job staying on top of the verifications that take place. And if you see that there have been X's, there was another question. If we just see the X, are we okay with our submission? No, you're not. That means we didn't verify, or nobody verified the placements. If you submitted 100 placements and you see no green buttons, that's the problem. That means your employers or your graduates did not respond. And it's in your best interest to follow up with the graduate and or the employer for the accuracy of the information you submitted, the email, the phone number. If you completed the spreadsheet correctly, that was a problem. Having the email information in the telephone number information, so it was all messed up and no one got anything. So it's important that you make sure that you that's accurate. And then you could also see, even if there's no indication for the graduate or the employer, ACICS could still do a review and deem a placement inappropriate or invalid based on what Carly said. Even if the graduate confirmed the placement for CNA, we're going to say it's invalid. Even if the graduate says, yes, I am working as a CNA, or the employer says, yes, we're going to deem it invalid based on what the guidance Carly already provided. I had it for a second and I lost it. Here it is right here. What if I'm going to read it and Carly can answer. If a mistake is made regarding the program, who do we contact to make the adjustment? What is their contact email and number?
Okay. Again, for those types of errors, you can do an override, so you would resubmit that student and it'll override the information with the corrected information.
Same with the phone number. Will you be adding an area for additional phone numbers? One, if it's incorrect or inappropriate, then you can do an override on the phone number as well. And this was the question. Are we good on PVP verification if all we see is an X in the employer graduate verification column on the PVP website? Or should we wait until we see an ACICS verified checkmark prior to considering it clear through PVP?
Yes, the answer is you would want to wait till it's ACICS verified to make sure to mark it off as a verified placement.
Since ACICS does not state the length of employment, would a week be considered sustainable? I have a follow-up question. If your daughter or your son got a job for a week, would you consider that sustainable? I'm supposed to answer that question, huh? No. Sometimes the placement date and placement period do not align due to delayed contact or verification responses internally for student or employer.
And that's fine. The placement period or the placement date would be when you confirmed that student is placed. So if you confirmed that yes, the student's placed as of October 2nd, then the placement period would be October.
Right. How often does the PVP review committee meet? How will the institution learn the outcome of the committee?
Right now, the review committee will meet on an as-needed basis, probably about monthly, and then you can expect to hear the outcome via email.
Right, because you're sending your appeal through an email that we created, so then you get a response through the manager of that email account concerning the decision. And I think Carly mentioned, and I'll reiterate, the decision is final. So you have the opportunity to appeal, and the committee will be taking, and for those of you who have gotten feedback from us, we don't just say, no, it's invalid because we think so. We look at the zip code on the department's website, we look at your program description, we include page numbers of your catalog, and the expected outcome of that program in terms of its career objectives. It's not just, it's a very thorough, thoughtful, no. Further, in some instances, I've noticed that even some schools will say, well, in our program description, we say the outcome is. Well, that might be incorrect. So just because you say the outcome of the program is to become a CNA for medical assistant program, that's like our champion example, doesn't make it appropriate. So in our final communication, we will say you need to revise it because that's inappropriate. That's not an appropriate outcome for this particular program, based on our review of your program description, SIP to SOC, the SIP description, etc.
Okay, the next question is how long does the process take to get the ACICS verification? We're actually starting to kind of streamline this, where previously it was a little bit more tedious because we had to pull it up one campus at a time to view these and then go back through, but now we're able to see those that have not been ACICS verified, so hopefully the time frame will be a little shorter now. But really, I guarantee, but I would say within a month following the verification of that.
Because sometimes not everyone responds at the same time. So if either employer or graduate responds on the second attempt, we have to go back and review those placements. Yeah. Will we get a final report before we start carve all the placements that was submitted, which ones include in the column, which cannot? I mean, I was able, a school logged in so I could see what they see on their end. And I mean, you have a pretty good list of what was verified. You can see the ones that we verified and which ones were not accepted. We're now trying to get some statistics on the validity rate, the verification rate, and ACICS's response rate on those verifications. But I'm not sure if we're to the point where we can get a report for the members. No, you can see the data. You can see your monthly submissions and track how many of your monthly submissions were accepted and how many were not. We will not be giving you a report now. Also, what does it mean if a graduate employer has not verified information but ACICS has verified information? Is there something we need to resubmit in order to obtain both? No. That's a good question. So, and I mentioned earlier, if in our review, because we do this, we go through this on a regular basis, you actually have someone that's her primary responsibility is to manage the PVP, the data, the submissions, and the review processes. That if you submitted and no one responded, the graduate or the employer did not submit, but we have already established that that placement is invalid, we will go ahead and mark it as invalid with an explanation. So there'll be no response from the graduate or the employer. There's nothing that you can appeal if you wish, but that's the only thing you can do. There's a good question. If the placement was intended to be sustainable, but the student quits in few days, is that still considered valid? So when did you confirm the placement, and when did the person quit? Between the time you submitted and right 2 days after you submitted, they told you that they quit. So because remember, you're reporting the placements once you confirm with the graduate or the graduate primarily or the employers. Some schools do both. So that's when you confirm the employment, and that's when you submit it for as a placement. So that's I've gotten that feedback before. Well, if they quit, it's not our fault. And we've had this discussion. I think that's an area for review by the committee in terms of if that's appropriate or acceptable. Based on my explanation, you could probably tell I'm on the side that says it's not acceptable. But that's for discussion by the committee. It's a committee of 4 or 5 of us. It's not just one person. Carly is going to take this one. Oh, okay. If there's a problem with student's name, she mentioned phone number or email, will ACICS inform the campus?
That's no, to be quite
We
clear.
have, what, 20,000 of these?
The only time we really discover that there is an issue is if it's not verified, if we don't get a verification from the employer or from the graduate. And like we mentioned earlier, that's on the institution to follow up with that graduate, with that employer, to see why that verification isn't happening.
We have a message that is cut off, so we are not sure what the result of the verification was. And we're making note of that right now. It says graduate responded by saying that she was, and I guess that the field is so short that they're unable to see the entire response. But we'll find out. Thank you for sharing. How do we get the rest of the information? It may just be the size of the field that you can't see the entire response. But we'll check with IT to make sure that that's clear up. And we may ask, based on the information we're sharing today, these changes will become live soon thereafter. So we'll take all this into account while we make those changes. Do we submit the whole spreadsheet of the month with the corrections or just the revised student? Just the revised student. Yeah, whichever one's going to override, you just say yes to override.
What action should we take for placements that have been neither approved nor denied? If you have a placement, again, that has not been verified, that's one thing. You obviously want to contact the graduate or the employer. If it's an issue that it has not been approved or denied by ACICS, certainly if it's been more than a month, you can contact us and just get a status update on what that is. Again, you can email me directly at kziegler@ACICS or cbarker@acics.org for Ms. Barker to get a clarification on that.
If a placement has not been verified by a graduate or employer through PVP, but is verified through telephone at a visit, will the verification be reflected on the PVP dashboard and be eligible? Yes. The staff staff coordinators, on-site staff coordinators are required to use the PVP dashboard and make the changes based on their verification on site.
So I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to their visits now.
There's a specific question about a specific school. Please email your question. Carly just gave you her email address. You can email Carly directly. You just signed up for that. Someone's asking about the other languages. Hi, Ian. This will also be part of the changes that we roll out tomorrow. So it'll be Danish, Croatian, and Italian. Yeah, it will be rolled out in addition to the revisions to the email content that we made. Thank you, sir. If a nursing student has not taken the NCLEX yet, but gets a job as a graduate nurse, can this count as a placement? I'm not sure what a graduate nurse is. Like a nurse student, like a student nurse? Because if it's required, licensure is required to be able to be a nurse. And the person asking this question is is an expert in the nursing field, so I would welcome some offline discussion on the graduate nurse and why it would be an appropriate placement. But if the NCLEX is required to be for licensure so you can practice as a nurse, then the answer right now would be no.
Yeah, and that's usually the case if in a field licensure is required.
Yeah.
That would usually be the expectation that they've received the licensure and have been placed.
There's a question, this might be a concern that we need to address, technical issue. We have one graduate with 2 degrees and it kicked out as an error. We need 2 verifications, 1 for each degree. And
in those instances, you only want to report that student once. So really you need to choose which degree that their placement is valid for.
It'd be interesting. If you have 2 different degrees, how do you get a placement in both degrees? If a graduate is not able to be verified the month it was submitted, can it be resubmitted the next month PVP?
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question. So if a graduate is not verified by, I'm assuming, the employer or the graduate, can it be resubmitted the next month? It could be resubmitted, but you need to have the, understand that every time you submit a student to the PVP, those emails are sent again. So they're sent upon submission, and then
2 weeks.
2 weeks following.
After that, and 2 weeks after that,
and then
so 3 times.
Following the original submission. So they received 3 emails. So after that point, if they're still not verifying, you can submit again, but it's just the same
I guess
emails.
my question is why?
Well, and that's
why?
what you want to look at. What I was going to say is you may want to look into why they're not responding to those emails before you just resubmit them.
Right.
And you don't have
to
to wait for the certain point each month. If you have an update on a student, you have an updated email address or something of that sort, you can go ahead and submit that student at any time. You don't have to wait for your next monthly submission.
What if a graduate gets a job prior to graduation, let's say in August, but it is a placement? Do we list it in the following month, September? So they got a job before they finished the program. Right, so you'd report them after they graduate from the program, not as an enrollment. Because up until, when are they supposed to graduate? Let's say in August. When a graduate gets a job, graduation is in August, they got a job before they graduate. So once they graduate, you know they have a job, you can report them for August once they graduate in September, correct? If placements have been missed for past PVP reporting period, how do we submit them? Good question.
Okay, now that there is a drop-down menu for the submission months, you can submit them separately. Just choose the appropriate month for when they were supposed to be submitted. And that way they'll match the placement month.
Someone saying, can you tell me the length of time from the employer grad verified and ACICS verified?
Again, that was one we spoke to already, that the time frame is usually within the month.
That's a good question. Hi, do you take into consideration programmatic accreditors' viewpoint standards when considering whether the placement is valid or not? If the programmatic accreditor says it's valid, do you consider that? No. We accept the programmatic accreditor's position on curriculum. That's what section 3-1- I believe 515 states. It's about the curriculum and the rigor of the curriculum, etc. Not ACICS student achievement standards, ACICS is student achievement standards.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding placement date and placement period must be in alignment. How does that work for those placed based on benefit to an existing position? Placement date and period. I'm not sure what the placement date and period question of that part of the question. But for benefit, it'd be once you confirm that. I mean, I guess you based after they graduate. Because it is benefit of an existing position, but you would report them after they've graduated from that program.
Because the expectation is that the benefit was received after graduating from that program.
Good point. There are two columns in the PVP portal, employer verified and then ACICS verified. To be clear, both columns must be marked as verified to be included in the 2017 CAR.
Yes.
Yes. If a student has completed or graduated but owes the school money, can the school still get credit for their placement? Did the school help them get the job?
If they're
Because completed means, yeah. You're still responsible for placing. Because ACICS includes graduates and completers in the placement calculation. And I do want to share something. Carly went through the presentation, but I wanted to share that we have reached out to students directly where they said, call me to confirm, or even employer. But instances where the students have called or emailed to say, follow up with me, you want to know about the school that I attended. It's interesting the responses we've gotten. The employer might say yes, actually, and the student might say no. They did not help me get a job, or they wanted me to claim something that I was doing way before I started the program as a placement, or the school just wants me to sign a form. These responses call into question the integrity of not just the data, but of the practices of the institution. And if it's overwhelming, that's why we're doing this on a month-to-month basis. If the review team see a pattern of that misrepresentation or even misalignment or wrong reporting. There was one situation where the employer was just not, the employer verified, but the student was wrong. The student said, I'm not even here. It's the wrong city, that kind of thing. Some of it is just user error, but if it is a pattern, then that will call into question the integrity of the information, and the council, that will be presented to the council for an action. So I just wanted to make note of that. Will we get the, what? One second. Can you share what ACICS response rate has been with regards to monthly verification letters? Response rate. I mentioned earlier, we're trying to get that statistical information for our own use, not for the schools though. And because you can see what you have submitted, how many of your employers and graduates responded. And this is interesting because using that info, you can also use that information to get your employee and graduate satisfaction surveys out. Because these are your employees and your graduates. So and you can see the information that you submit and who responded to it. Someone asked about the incomplete message, and we noted that with IT, and we're going to follow up on that for you. Is there a requirement on when campus verifies the placement? We follow up all graduates at the same time, so when we verify is different from the placement date. But we will submit once we have verified, not when they're placed. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, that again, we mentioned that the placement date would be when the placement has been confirmed.
What if we see green buttons in the employer grad column but not yet in ACICS verification column? Nothing. And we don't want, and that's something we're going to try to avoid. Just because we do this in a systematic way, and Carly mentioned earlier, we're able to see the 2,000 that have not yet been verified, and we have a number of people working to do the verification. We don't need individual schools contacting us and said, you have not yet verified. We know that. So we're working our way through, and we have staff members assigned to different systems or groups of schools, and we're working through them and monitoring how quickly we verify, etc. We just, if it's verified by the employer or graduate, you're fine. Then we have to do our part, and we'll do that as quickly as possible. We just don't need schools saying, hey, someone verified this morning and you have not verified this afternoon. That's going to get annoying very quickly. Will ACICS consider documentation from the working number as sufficient for the employer, for the PVP? Employers sometimes do not disclose and defer to that when contacting them. No. We have to get something from the employer that says yes or no. Or call me. If you just say call me, then there won't be a green button, but then we would record what they said in the notes and then decide if it's valid or not.
Mm-hmm.
We have large health systems that hire MA grads. Supervisors are not allowed to verify employment and refer us to their HR department. The HR department uses the the work source to verify employment. Is then in these instances, is the grad going to be the only source to verify via PVP?
Yes.
Yes.
And that's why we, seek verification from either or the employer or the graduate.
There are no green buttons on our end, only X and checks. I guess that you get a check. I'm sorry if I said, I think I made the check, sorry. Apologize for the
Yeah, on
confusion.
our end it shows up as a green button.
If the ACICS verified field has no red or green indication, what does that mean? It means we haven't reviewed it yet. And like I said earlier, please don't send individual emails asking us to verify. I joined late. Will I get a recording? Yes, this will be part of the AWARE. It's one full webinar once we have it cleaned up. And someone mentioned that it's the previous format was difficult to review. We'll see if we can do the recording and the PowerPoint somewhere on YouTube. There's an age-old question about OPT. Are schools required to report OPT? You're not required to report OPT. On the car, it's one of the areas that as a, what do you call a waiver, not available for placement category. So you could put all your OPT students in that, all the students on visa restrictions in that category. If you do want to report OPT, you have to report that entire group of OPT students as available for placement. And let me explain a little further to be clear. If you have 10 international students, all of them qualify to be in that waiver category of visa restrictions, so none of them are available for placement. If one or two got a job and you want to report them on the OPT as placed, then the entire 10, the group, becomes available for placement. So you have 2 that are placed and then you have 8 that are not placed. So it's one or the other, you can't have it both ways. Although we may not have graduates in a certain month, however, we placed a previous grad that they should be included, correct?
Yes, because remember the placement period is for placements that took place that month, not just graduates that month. So whatever placements happen or are confirmed in that month, that's the month they should be reported in, not just the month they graduate in.
Are we required to submit placements from previous cohorts, 2015, 2016, or prior to that on PVP? No, that's from 16, 15. I mean, it's difficult as it is to get to verify data from 16 to go to 15. Because remember, this information Carly mentioned earlier is going to roll up into the CAR. And that's why we want you to report the graduation date when they graduate, so we can know that's in the 16, 17 CAR period. We recognize that some of these graduates may have been in the 15-16 CAR period because they got a job in August or September thereabout. So we'll filter those out, but it's only for those in the 16-17 reporting period.
We follow up placement 6 months after graduation. Is there a requirement? While we don't specify an exact time limit when you need to follow up, I would probably caution that 6 months often is a little late. It's easy to lose touch with those graduates at that point and makes it obviously a lot more difficult to follow up, to have a valid email address for them and or their employer.
So if there's no response from a grad or employer via the email from ACICS, but there is a check in the ACICS column, can that be included in the 2017 CAR? That more likely happened because there was a call, right? So there's no check because they didn't actually use the email to confirm, but they might say, call me. And if our team called and they verified, then that's why. That's correct.
The employer will refer the school to verify employment through a 1-800 number and will not give employee information to placement. Should I list the 1-800 number? No, because that number will not be used unless they request a call. Again, this is why we request verification from either the employer or the graduate. So in those cases, it would be upon the graduate to verify.
Is there a way to add a component so we can see when ACICS approved? No, that's the system. We're trying to expand the system as much as possible to make it as user-friendly yet efficient as possible. And to get down to when we actually verify, that's asking for a bit much. I'm always concerned when there are questions about how long and what period of time is considered sustainable or full-time, those kinds of questions. How long does it take to make a placement valid? I mean, as a professional, I think we're all on the same page in terms of the expectation of when you get a job, what would be considered sustainable. We're not to the point where we dictate if it's 30, 60, 90 days. And trust me, some people would wish, are hoping for 90 days before it's considered. We're not there yet. But, so judgment, appropriate judgment is necessary for that question in terms of how long we consider it sustainable. Will the student with this position be able to pay off the high student loan or support their family, etc.? That's a better question than how long do you consider it sustainable.
And again, the expectation is that the institutions or the campus is following up with those grads. So if we do not verify them due to it not being sustainable, then the campus should be following up with that graduate.
Where's the email located? I'm not sure what that means. Is that the email that we for the PVP review team? Please qualify.
So is this correct? Placement date and period is when the campus verifies the placement, not when the graduate is actually placed. Obviously, we'd like to get more accurate data, so preferably we'd like to have the actual placement date. However, if that is not available and the closest we can get is the date that that placement was confirmed, then obviously that's accepted.
If a graduate signs the ACICS Placement Verification Program Student Placement Attestation Form, which, by the way, we're no longer using, for placement as a phlebotomist, does that still get deemed as invalid? I'll let Carly answer that.
Yes, that it would be an invalid for the reasons we stated earlier. A phlebotomist, a graduate of a medical assistant program is not using the predominant amount of skills from their program in the position as a phlebotomist.
And someone has a follow-up question. What if the skills list includes MA duties? To understand from a phlebotomist, the phlebotomy is part of the MA, not MA part of phlebotomy. And probably I'm missing something. And again, we've sought guidance and consulted with MA instructors and experts in the field. So this is not from our own limited perspective.
And if there are questions, we do a further review. We look at the program descriptions. We look at position descriptions, similar job descriptions that we can find. We may reach out to the employer to find out the skills that are required of that placement. So these assessments, if you will, are not being made without due diligence.
Do you have a list of job titles that are not appropriate? No, we don't have a list, but what we've been trying to do is, and that's why we moved to providing that external comment to the school so you can see what our feedback is. So if you did it the first time, then you probably won't do it next month because we provide that feedback that that's not appropriate. We don't have a list, but again, it's an assessment of is that appropriate, not from our part necessarily, but from your part in terms of the use of the skills, the program description, the intended outcome of that program, and the placements. I mean, we've seen some that are laughable at best, and and the worst case would be very, very disappointing that some institutions would claim that a McDonald's or Taco Bell placement is appropriate for culinary arts. I mean, that's unacceptable in any way, shape, or form you twist it and turn it. That's unacceptable. It shouldn't have been ACICS telling you that based on your own employment review and career services review that's not appropriate, and feedback from your students. That's not acceptable, period. I had an employee who requested a phone call, had a set up window of time, and then wasn't called. He tried following up and never got a response. What can be done to ensure great customer service is provided? I guess the subtle point here that it's bad customer service on our part. And like I said previously, we're doing our best to keep up with all the placements and all the requests for phone calls. But I'm sure, as you may be aware, we're limited in how much we can do at any one point in time. So we do apologize for not following up with that employer, as he's the one working directly with your students. It was not intentional. And also, too, we also have time constraints. So just because an employer say, call me between 12 and 1 on Wednesday afternoon, if we have an emergency staff meeting, we probably cannot call that person from 12 to 1 on Wednesday afternoon. And the time zones. Are there any tips on how to stay on top of this? A lot of data has to be accurate, also making sure employers and graduates, no longer with no control so much, respond timely and completely, with a lot at stake for the school. Have any schools worked out a successful pattern on this? Is there a way to share efficient ways other schools may have found to do this? Those are thoughtful questions. And we have gotten feedback from those schools that are on top of it. Every time a placement comes through, they're on it in terms of the response. So it's committing a specific individual for that role, basically, to monitor and manage. And the career services individual, should be their primary responsibility to provide that hands-on active involvement in the verification process.
And just on top of that, we do try to do some of kind of the best practices sharing workshops and things like that, especially because we do know that, certainly this is a true struggle for a lot of our campuses. So we do try to allow for that and certainly encourage it.
Many jobs appear with other positions as a means of saving employee costs. When this happens, our medical admin can actually be employed full-time as a unit secretary and part of the job as a PCA. This is a little specific because I don't know what the PCA is and all that stuff. So please send your questions to Carly or Carissa, or if it's an appeals, then through the appeals process. But this is a little specific. Will we still report placements on the car, or will ACICS fill that portion based upon? No, we're not there yet. We're going to auto-fill the car for you. So you'd have to submit the car. We have online students abroad. Does employment of the countries, mainly non-English speaking, get verified? And I mentioned earlier we just added languages. We added we had Spanish already for the schools that in Spanish-speaking countries, all areas. So the students can choose the language that they want: Spanish, Italian, Croatian, and Danish, and English. So we have the different options, language options. Why are skills and benefit of training weighed differently? Good question. Well, skills, a good example would be they've completed a business management program. They didn't become a business manager, but they're using skills from that business management program, which is different than benefit, which means they already had the job. That's the difference. For the benefit, it's supposed to benefit their current employment. That's the difference. What if ACICS marked it verified, but it does not show the grad? I think we talked about it earlier, right?
Yeah, again, that would be due to if a phone call confirmation was made. If they requested a phone call, we reached out and spoke with them, and they verified that it was a valid placement.
That should not be a concern. The concern is if we say no, then that's because we called someone, graduate and/or employer, and they said, which happens a few times, yeah. Or the employer said, we never heard of this person. I guess this one. Will placements that have not been verified by ACICS grad employer need to be excluded? Yes. I think Carly mentioned that in the presentation, that only those verified by ACICS and a grad, ACICS has to be included in that verification equation. So ACICS can verify without that button or that confirmation from a grad or employer that you can see, because it's through a phone call. But as long as ACICS verifies, then that counts. If you do not verify, then it does not count. Oh wow. You have 10 more minutes. If we have a 2017 cohort grad that is not placed until the end of October 2017, we will not be submitting them for PVP until November 2017 after the card due date. How is that timing going to be incorporated? Well, the 2017 cohort, they graduated in October, so they missed the 2016-17 card period.
No, I think the question is if, they were a grad from that 2017 cohort, but they weren't placed until the end of October.
Cohort from the car cohort.
Yeah, so they fell into the car period.
Okay.
And once we get to that point, so eventually where this is going is we'd go to a rolling car, but I don't want to cause panic at this point. That won't be for a while down the road. But at that point, obviously, if the submission isn't until the end of November, that's when we would be able to roll all that up. So the car period still stands. You have until that end of November, or I'm sorry, November 1st to count your placements, and that would still be the case.
Right.
With just that later reporting due date. But obviously, if you have a grad that was placed November 2nd, that you report in that, they would not be included.
Since the new person designated to verify placement have been implemented, ACICS has been able to achieve 100% verification during a visit by phone call.
There have been cases,
yeah.
yes.
Well, using the PVP, because what we've done, if with the implementation of the PVP along with the DIR role, if 50% of the placements were already verified through the PVP, then the on-site person would only do the remaining 50%, which increases our chances of achieving 100% verification. And also depends on the number too. Some schools have 10, some schools have 300. So that impacts our ability to achieve that 100%. I know we did some review and it was like 90-something%.
Mm-hmm.
We've gotten to like 90-something% verification.
It's not always easy to tell exactly too, because if a graduate placement can't be verified, the institution may withdraw that as a placement or resubmit with a new placement. So it's kind of hard to configure that data to exactly that 100%. But yes, with the visits, especially doing verifications, we do get a very high verification. Here's one, assistant manager at a Dairy Queen who is content with that position. Would that not be appropriate for a placement in a management field? Well, I'm assuming that placement would be categorized as a skills
and did they
placement.
they completed the management program?
Yeah, it would depend on what skills are being used in that position.
Yeah, the manager and they got a management position. We're going through the questions. We have quite a few. Someone's still asking what the court date. Someone's question got cut off.
There was a question, where would the feedback be found? And there are fields specifically field. It's usually for placements that cannot be verified, or if we have specific questions, it would show up in the listing that you see on your side.
Give us a second. Someone says we have a high number of graduates working in the government holding high-level security clearances. They cannot confirm. Can you please advise? And that's an offline question. And we are very familiar with the government agencies and the need for secrecy. So that's an offline. Email Carly, and then we can discuss and advise accordingly.
Yeah, those ones would be brought to the review committee for further discussion.
1 second. If we have a third-party auditor who obtain a recording, no, we're not using third-party verifiers. Can we use that as part of the appeal? No, we only hear from the grad or the employer. Someone is saying we are required to have 100% verification by the U.S. Department of Education. And it would be helpful if you could share that communication to the department considering that We have a couple that were checked as verified by ACICS, but not by the graduate or the employer. Like we said, as we said earlier, it probably because the grad or the employer asked us to give them a call, and we did, and then we verified. Once the check is with ACICS, you're okay. Is that? Is this still in effect, one resubmission per graduate? So and that's what Carl and I were discussing a little while ago. What is a resubmission of what? Did they get a new job, a different phone number, a different email address? What are you resubmitting for consideration after that 1 month? And we're going to specific, and that's the trap I think that we find ourselves walking directly into, is trying to qualify and to justify and explain what would be acceptable as a placement or not. And I'm very conscious of what I put on record. That's going to be recorded and on YouTube. So if you have specific questions, again, Carly and Carissa.
And again, there's good cause for doing that, is because certainly, like I said, we look at some positions and the position description for one with one agency, organization, company may differ from the position description at another organization. So we can't necessarily compare one side by side.
And there's one about freelance work. I mean, if you get one job that lasts 1 day, is that sustainable? And that's I almost have to ask that question back at you. Is that sustainable if a freelancer gets one job for 1 day, once every, how often? Every month, every week? Is that sustainable for that individual in terms of employment? Someone said I misread a question. Give me a second. Someone said I misread the weighing question. Please, well, we have a copy of this question, and then I'll just have to follow up with you because the little detailed, and we only have a couple minutes before this webinar gets cut off. Give me 1 second. Some people say that the employers have responded and they're not seeing a check mark, and that's a technical issue, and we'll follow up with IT on those issues. The check mark's not showing, the field being limited, and you can't see all the response from ACICS as to why it's invalid, etc. So we'll follow up. We'll review all these concerns and follow up as to why. I'm with IT on why that's happening. All right, this and that we can see the check. Yeah. Do you have one?
So there's one question that, in talking about check marks in both columns, some again noting that there may be a check in the ACICS column, however, not in the employer graduate column. Again, if there is a check mark in the ACICS verified column, that would be acceptable because in those instances, most likely we have spoken to either the student or I'm sorry, the graduate or the employer directly via phone call, so that way we have verified it that way. So if the ACICS verified column is checked, then it can be presumed that that's an acceptable placement.
So if it's possible to place a September graduate, they will hire in August, or do you have to wait until they graduate? Until they graduate, because you're reporting graduates or completers. They're done with the program. Because remember, if they're supposed to graduate in September and they got a job in the summer, then once they graduate, you mark them as placed, and then we're going to send that email to confirm. The Excel document will be updated, and that's what Carly, I believe, said in her presentation. We're updating the spreadsheet so that you can use it going forward. And we held back on giving you the new spreadsheet until we had a chance to explain these changes to you, which will be tomorrow. We've already provided guidance to the if ACICS put an X, there should be an explanation as to what that X means. If send the Carly or Carissa an email with the screenshots for the particular student, because they need to know what student you're looking at and what information you're seeing, and they can follow up with you. I think we need to wrap it up. Oh my, there are quite a few questions left. The PVP and the CAR are not one and the same. So the PVP doesn't supersede anything. The PVP is just a monthly reporting of placement information that requires confirmation by the graduate or the employer and validation by ACICS. And I think, oops, we're out of time, Carly? We still have a few questions left that we're unable to answer. Please follow up with via email to Carly and Carissa. Feel free to copy me so that the review team can consider all these questions that we didn't get to include in our FAQs online, I think. Yeah, Carly's keeping a running track of all the questions and the responses that we should give on those. Okay. Oh, all right, and that's it. We'll be posting the webinar within the next couple of days. You have to go through. Oh, where? Oh, I think I sent. It was on the presentation. It's under the webinar information. ACICS webinar information. ACICS aware. It's on our website. All right. Thank you everyone for your patience and your time, your participation, your questions, and I wish you the best in 2017. Take care. Oh. Mute me then.